In this lesson, we'll take a close look at least common multiples. To begin, the least common multiple of two integers, x and y, is the smallest positive integer that has x and y as its divisors. To illustrate this concept, let's find the least common multiple of 4 and 6. We'll begin by listing the first few multiples of 4, and we'll list the first few multiples of 6. Notice that 4 and 6 have several multiples in common. They both share 12 as a multiple, and they share common multiples of 24 and 36. In fact, if we continue listing the multiples of each number, we'll find that there is an infinite number of common multiples. Now, out of all the multiples that 4 and 6 have in common, the smallest is 12. So the least common multiple of 4 and 6 is 12. Let's try another example. To find the least common multiple of 9 and 15, we'll first list some of their multiples. From here, we can see that some of the multiples they have in common are 45, 90, and many more. The smallest multiple they have in common is 45, so the least common multiple of 9 and 15 is 45. So one method for finding the least common multiple is to list the first few positive multiples, and then determine which of the common multiples is the smallest. Now let's examine another technique for finding the least common multiple. To demonstrate this technique, we'll find the least common multiple of 12 and 56. For this technique, we'll first find the prime factorization of 12, and then we'll find the prime factorization of 56. At this point, we'll find all of the prime factors that they have in common. Now they both share one pair of 2's and another pair of 2's, so we'll note that here. Now we'll take each of the prime factors remaining and list them with the two common prime factors. At this point, the least common multiple will be the product of these numbers, which is 168. Let's try another example. Let's find the least common multiple of 18 and 42. So first, we'll find the prime factorization of each number. Then we'll note the prime factors that the two numbers share. Then we'll take all of the remaining numbers and include them in our list. Finally, the least common multiple will be the product of these numbers. So the least common multiple of 18 and 42 is 126. So that's the systematic way to find least common multiples. Now that you know two ways to find the least common multiple, you may be wondering when you will ever need it. For example, under what circumstances would we ever need to find the least common multiple of 4 and 6? Well, one situation is adding and subtracting fractions. For example, if you want to add these two fractions, you will need to first rewrite them using the same denominator. So we're now looking for the smallest number that 4 and 6 both divide into. That number is 12, so we can rewrite our two fractions with denominator 12. In this example, 12 is the least common multiple of 4 and 6. However, in situations involving fractions, it is usually referred to as the lowest common denominator of 4 and 6. Just remember that both terms mean the same thing. So once we have the lowest common denominator, we can create two equivalent fractions and then combine them. Now, to become an expert on least common multiples, you will need certain skills. First, you must be able to find least common multiples by listing multiples, as we did at the beginning of this lesson. You should also be good at finding least common multiples in your head. For example, in your head, you should be able to identify that the least common multiple of 10 and 15 is 30. Or the least common multiple of 3 and 9 is 9. Or how about 2 and 7? Well, here the least common multiple is 14. Another important skill is the ability to find the least common multiple using the prime factorization technique. And finally, you should be good at finding pairs of numbers that have a certain least common multiple. For example, what are two numbers that have a least common multiple of 18? Well, there are several pairs of numbers that meet this condition. They include 6 and 9, 9 and 18, 18 and 18, as well as 1 and 18. Plus, there are many more. Okay, so these are the skills you will need if you want to master questions involving least common multiple. In this lesson, we'll examine a formula that shows the relationship that exists between the greatest common divisor and the least common multiple of two numbers. To demonstrate this relationship, we'll find the greatest common divisor of 18 and 42, and we'll find the least common multiple of the same two numbers. In both cases, we'll use the prime factorization technique. So we'll begin by finding the prime factorization of both numbers, and then we'll find all of the prime numbers that they have in common. From here, we take one number from each pair to be included in our calculations. Now, for the least common multiple, we also take the remaining prime factors and include them in the calculations. From here, we find the products to get the respective greatest common divisor and least common multiple of the two numbers. Now, here comes the most important observation. Notice that if we take the prime numbers in this calculation and combine them with the prime numbers in this calculation, we have now accounted for every prime number in the prime factorizations of 18 and 42. This observation leads us to a nice rule that says, if we take the greatest common divisor of two numbers and multiply it by the least common multiple of those two numbers, the product will be equal to the product of the two original numbers. Let's verify this. The greatest common divisor of 18 and 42 is 6, and the least common multiple of 18 and 42 is 126. We want to confirm that this product is equal to the product of 18 times 42. When we multiply this out, we see that the two products are indeed equal. Now, this formula does not come up very often. However, if you do encounter a question that involves the greatest common divisor and the least common multiple of two numbers, this formula may come in handy.